if I want to do the ratio of blacks in Minnesota to Latinos in Minnesota, then I do the first number first, 383,000 over 310,000, right? And remember, we want to go a step further and actually do the division. And so it looks like I get this crazy number. Now, there's no information about rounding, so you got to make your own choice about how you're going to round it. Again, all at the very basic level, I want to encourage and empower you to round, just to make a decision to round, right? Don't write every single digit that comes out of your calculator because it's not helpful to have all of those pieces of information. Can someone give me a good rounding here?
1.24.
Ah, beautiful, Tamika. And just a little zoom hint, and a lot of, if you're on a computer, often you can just press the space bar and it'll unmute you so you can talk, and then you let go and it puts you back on mute. Saves you from having to find the mute button. Okay. And just to go back to the other thing we talked about on Tuesday, is this a part to part or a part to whole ratio? I didn't ask that question, but that's something that you should be thinking about, especially if you're going to move on to the interpretation phase. What do you think? See, this was hard for us on Tuesday. Is part to part or part to whole?
Part to part.
Good. And remember, from my perspective, the best question to ask yourself is, are the things on top a part of the things on the bottom? Now, because the number on top is larger than the number on the bottom, maybe that is obvious to you that that's not possible. But also, if we're thinking about these as distinct groups, and of course, all of these racial lines are much more complicated than, you know, a survey form allows it to be, although we do have mixed race and, you know, black Hispanic and black non-Hispanic. But anyways, yeah, these are two separate groups of people theoretically, and so they're part to part. The top number is not a part of the bottom number, right? Okay, now the second one is the one where, and by the way, this is the one where you would get away with it if you just did 383 divided by 310, because of course that's the same thing. I just crossed off the zeros and it's the same ratio. But that's because both of these numbers happen to be in the same unit, which was thousands of people. But this one, it really makes a difference. If you don't pay attention to the thousands and the millions, you're going to get it wrong. So we got 383,000 and we've got 5.6 million. So I do my ratio. It's always good to write out the ratio instead of going directly to your calculator. And I divide. I do see people fairly commonly reversing that division. I don't know if that's a long division confusion. Who's outside, who's inside? We're not doing long division. It's just on your calculator, the way you see it, the way you read it. Or if it's a confusion about, I don't like that number because it's small and 0.06, I'd rather get a whole number, which you do if you take the bigger divided by the smaller. But don't worry about that. The order is what it is. You don't get to choose to turn it around because you don't want a 0.06 number. Okay, now let's ask ourselves the same question. Part to part, part to whole. Is the number on the top a part of the number on the bottom? Yeah, it is. Right, they're part of Minnesota, so you know they're, that group on top is a part of the larger group. That's a part to whole. And what is the significance of part to whole? The kind of key thing about a part to whole ratio that's special, and it can help in our interpretation. Why do we even care if it's part to part or part to whole? Just let the ratio be who it is. That's good. I can see Tamika looking back at her notes. See, now that's a good student. That's why you have notes. one of the reasons why you would have notes is so that you could look back at stuff you wrote down. So this was on, let me see if my book is open. No, I restarted my computer. I gotta reopen this. So the whole idea of part to part, part to whole, the key aspect of it is that a part to whole ratio can be turned into a percentage. And that, in a lot of ways, when you're going to interpret it, and I mean, I didn't ask you to interpret this, so it's okay if you didn't go there. Part of that is, man, that is not the one I wanted. You know, it's just going to sound easier to talk about if we have it as a percentage. So now we're going to talk more in depth about percentages in a little bit. Just trying to get to this page here. Right, is this part that I kind of asked you to highlight here. Part to whole ratios can be expressed as percentages. That's really the biggest deal in terms of distinguishing between part to part and part to whole. And I think the most significant thing is that you'll get decimals sometimes that you think, oh, I'd like to turn this into a percentage, but then once you think about it and analyze whether it's part to part or part to whole, you realize you can't. This 0.068 could be turned into a percentage. In general, there's a couple of ways to think about turning something into a percentage, moving the decimal 2 places or multiplying by 100, but this is 6.8%, right? So instead of saying for every blah, there are blah, we could just say 6.8% of, let me back over here, 6.8% of Minnesota's population is Black. And I was kind of going down this road because there was some statistics I was reading about the use of chokehold, and that's one of the things that we do when we're trying to understand injustice and inequality is we look at proportionality and we say, well, 6.8% of the population is Black, then about 7% of this thing should be Black people as well. And when it's not, when it's 20% or 30%, then you start to say, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like things are happening in a fair way, that it has nothing to do with people's rights. Okay, so let's